Memories of Childhood, Episode 6, The Warmest Table in the World. The Gian Part 1, When the Evening Smoke rose. The afternoon was slowly giving way to evening. Across the Vietnamese countryside, the brilliant sunlight softened into a warm, golden glow, gently embracing the rice fields that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. The breeze carried the sweet scent of ripening grain, while the bamboo groves whispered quietly, as if they were telling stories only the wind could understand. The village was changing its rhythm. The laughter of children that had echoed across the riverbanks all afternoon began drifting closer to home. Water buffaloes walked patiently along the narrow dirt paths, their bells ringing softly with every step. Flocks of white birds crossed the orange sky before disappearing behind distant coconut trees. And then, the first thin ribbons of smoke began to rise from the rooftops. To many people, they were only cooking fires. But to every child in the village, they were a promise. A promise that another beautiful day would end with everyone together. I still remember standing beside the small river, after an afternoon of swimming with my friends. Our clothes were still damp, our feet were covered with mud, and our faces were glowing from hours spent beneath the summer sun. No one wanted to go home just yet. Someone was still trying to catch a dragonfly. Another boy was carefully placing a tiny leaf boat onto the gentle current, watching it drift farther and farther away. We all knew our mothers would call us soon. But for a few more precious minutes, the world still belonged to us. Then, carried gently by the evening breeze, came the sound every child recognized immediately. Our mothers' voices. Each mother called differently. Some called softly. Some called loudly enough for the entire village to hear. Yet, somehow, among dozens of familiar voices floating through the fields, every child could instantly recognize the one that belonged to home. My son, dinner is ready. It is strange how memory works. After so many years, I cannot remember every lesson I learned at school. I cannot remember every toy I once owned. But I still remember the sound of my mother's voice crossing the rice fields at sunset. Perhaps love has its own way of remaining unforgettable. Reluctantly, we picked up our sandals and began the familiar walk home. The dirt path felt warm beneath our feet after a long day under the sun. Along the roadside, wildflowers nodded gently in the breeze. Butterflies settled quietly among the grass. Somewhere nearby, crickets were already beginning their evening song. The village felt peaceful, not because nothing was happening, but because everything was happening exactly as it should. As I walked closer to our little house, another familiar fragrance found me before I reached the front gate. Freshly cooked rice. Even today, I believe there is no perfume more comforting than the smell of rice steaming inside a simple family kitchen. It was the scent of safety, the scent of waiting, the scent of knowing that someone had been thinking about you while preparing the evening meal. When I stepped into the yard, my mother was still tending the small wood burning stove. Tiny flames danced beneath a black iron pot, while thin curls of fragrant smoke disappeared into the evening sky. Beside her, freshly picked morning glory waited to be cooked. A small bowl of fish that my father had caught from the river rested quietly on the wooden table. There was no feast, no expensive ingredients, only vegetables from our garden, a few fish from the river, fresh rice from our fields, and the quiet love that had seasoned every meal long before it reached the table. As a child, I never thought our dinners were simple. To me, they were complete, because everyone I loved was there. My father had just returned from the fields, wiping the sweat from his forehead before washing his hands at the old clay water jar. My grandmother smiled as she arranged the bowls. My younger sister peeked into the pot, hoping dinner might be ready just a little sooner. No one hurried. No one ate alone. The food could wait. What mattered was waiting for one another. Only when everyone had taken their place around the little wooden table did my mother finally smile and quietly say, "Let's eat." Looking back now, I realize that those 3 simple words carried far more warmth than I understood as a child. Because they never meant only, "Dinner is ready." They meant, "Our family is together." And perhaps that has always been the richest meal any child could ever receive. Part 2. A table filled with love. The moment everyone gathered around the little wooden table, the entire house seemed to change. Outside, the evening breeze continued to wander gently through the bamboo trees, carrying the last songs of birds returning to their nests. The golden sunlight slowly faded beyond the rice fields, leaving behind a peaceful sky painted with soft shades of amber and lavender. Inside our small home, another kind of warmth quietly began. It came from the fire beneath the clay stove, from the steam rising gently from bowls of freshly cooked rice, from the familiar voices of the people we loved most. The table itself was small. Its surface had been polished smooth by countless family meals, tiny scratches marking the passing of years. It was far from perfect. Yet somehow, it was the most beautiful table I have ever known. Mother placed a bowl of fragrant white rice in front of each of us before quietly serving the dishes she had prepared. There was a simple bowl of morning glory, freshly picked from our garden only an hour earlier. A pot of crab soup, tender green vegetables, still steaming gently. A small plate of caramelized climbing perch that Father had caught in the river that very morning. A tiny dish of salted eggplant rested beside a bowl of fish sauce, its familiar aroma filling the room with memories that no expensive restaurant could ever recreate. Nothing on that table was luxurious, but everything carried love. I never once heard my parents apologize because our meals were simple. Instead, they smiled. They invited us to eat. And somehow, their gratitude made every meal feel abundant. Father always waited until Mother had finished serving everyone before lifting his chopsticks. It was a habit so ordinary that, as children, we hardly noticed it. Only years later did I understand what quiet respect looks like. It does not always arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes, it is simply waiting. Grandmother would gently place the best piece of fish into her grandchildren's bowls before taking any for herself. When we protested, she only smiled. "I've already had enough." As children, we believed her. As adults, we finally understood she had simply wanted us to have more. Love often speaks the softest language. My younger sister could never sit still for very long. She would proudly tell Mother about the dragonflies she had chased that afternoon. My brother interrupted to explain how his little leaf boat had sailed farther than anyone else's. Father laughed. Mother listened. Grandmother smiled quietly while adding another spoonful of soup to our bowls. Looking back now, I realized no one at that table was trying to impress anyone. There were no perfect conversations, no carefully chosen words, only ordinary stories from an ordinary day. And perhaps that is exactly why they became extraordinary memories. Between every laugh and every shared story, I could hear the gentle sounds that filled our little home. The soft tapping of chopsticks against porcelain bowls, the bubbling soup still resting on the stove, the evening crickets singing outside, the rustling bamboo leaves dancing with the wind. Together, they created a melody that still lives inside my heart. Sometimes the electricity would suddenly disappear, as it often did in those days. The room would grow darker for just a moment. Then Mother would calmly light the old kerosene lamp. Its small golden flame filled the room with a gentle glow, casting dancing shadows upon the wooden walls. Strangely, those evenings never frightened us. If anything, they felt even warmer. The little flame gathered us closer together, we talked longer, we laughed louder. Without television, without phones, without anything demanding our attention except one another. Perhaps we owned very little. But we gave one another something that has become increasingly rare: our complete attention. Even today, when I sit in beautiful restaurants filled with elegant lights and delicious food, a small part of my heart quietly returns to that humble, wooden table. Because I have learned something life never teaches in books. The richest meal is not the one with the most dishes. It is the one where no one feels alone. Outside, the first stars had begun appearing above the village. The evening breeze carried the sweet fragrance of jasmine through the open window. Dinner was almost over. The bowls were nearly empty. But no one hurried to leave the table. Because everyone knew sometimes the sweetest part of a family meal begins only after the last bite has been shared. And on that quiet summer evening, another beautiful memory was patiently waiting, just beyond the warm light of our little home. Part 3. After the last bowl of rice. Dinner was over. The bowls had been emptied. The chopsticks rested quietly across the blue and white porcelain bowls that had served our family for as long as I could remember. Outside, the last colors of sunset slowly disappeared beyond the rice fields, and the evening wrapped the village in its gentle embrace. Yet no one stood up. There was no rush. No one glanced at a clock. No one felt the need to be somewhere else. The meal had ended. But the togetherness had only just begun. Father leaned back against the wooden pillar of the house, slowly sipping a cup of warm green tea. His hands, rough from years of working in the fields, rested peacefully on his knees. The lines on his face seemed softer now, illuminated by the quiet glow of the kerosene lamp. Mother gathered the empty bowls with the same gentle movements she had repeated thousands of times before. When I was a child, I thought she was simply cleaning the table. Today, I understand she was quietly taking care of the people she loved. Grandmother reached for her old hand fan, moving it slowly back and forth as the warm summer air drifted through the open windows. Then she began telling stories. Stories about the village long before we were born. Stories about seasons of heavy rain and golden harvests. Stories about how Father had once climbed a mango tree and refused to come down until sunset. Every story made us laugh. Every laugh made the little house feel even warmer. Sometimes the electricity would suddenly disappear. Darkness gently filled the room. No one complained. Mother calmly adjusted the wick of the kerosene lamp, and a soft golden light spread across the wooden walls once again. That little lamp never seemed bright enough to light the whole house. Yet, somehow, it always lit every face around the table. Looking back now, I realized something extraordinary. The brightest evenings of my childhood were never the ones with electricity. They were the ones where we looked into one another's eyes instead of glowing screens. Perhaps light has never come only from lamps. Perhaps it has always come from the people sitting beside us. Outside, crickets had begun their nightly concert. Somewhere beyond the bamboo grove, a frog answered from the edge of the pond. The breeze carried the sweet fragrance of jasmine blossoms into the room, mixing gently with the fading aroma of freshly cooked rice. I remember lying on the cool wooden floor, resting my head against Father's leg while listening to the voices around me. No one was telling me to become successful. No one was asking about grades. No one was worrying about tomorrow. For a little while, we were simply a family enjoying the quiet gift of being together. As children, We often believe the most important moments in life will arrive with great celebrations, birthdays, festivals, achievements. But now, I know the moments that stay with us forever are often the quietest ones. An ordinary dinner, a simple conversation, the sound of someone laughing across the table, the feeling of knowing, without anyone saying the words, that you are deeply loved. Years later, I have shared meals in beautiful restaurants beneath sparkling chandeliers. I have tasted dishes prepared by famous chefs. I have sat at tables covered with elegant plates and polished silver. Yet whenever someone asks me, what was the best meal of your life? My heart never hesitates. It always returns to that little wooden table in our village. Not because the food was extraordinary, but because love was served with every bowl of rice. Perhaps that is why memory never lets those evenings fade. The rice has long been eaten. The soup has long grown cold. The little wooden table has grown older with time. But the warmth, the laughter, the quiet conversations beneath the gentle glow of the kerosene lamp still live inside me. And I believe they always will. As Mother opened the front door before going to bed, the cool night breeze quietly entered the house. Far away from somewhere beyond the old banyan tree at the entrance of the village, a familiar voice drifted softly through the darkness. Ko Ko, the candy seller. His gentle call floated through the sleeping village like an old song carried by the wind. I smiled. Tomorrow, after another beautiful day, perhaps we would run barefoot to the village road once again, following that unforgettable sound. And another childhood memory was already waiting for us. I'll see you in our next memory.